right. Thanks you guys for being here. Appreciate you guys having interest in us and special teams and here at the University of Iowa. And just it's good to see your guys' faces. I know I've seen a couple of you guys on the sidelines and around media day. It's good to see you guys as close as we can here in person today. But happy with how kind of we're trending right now. There's certainly a lot of work to do. Certainly a lot of work to do. A few questions we have that we're trying to get answers to, and some guys starting to emerge a little bit. But I think Tori's been punting the ball well. I think both kickers are still in a competition that's been pretty heated and pretty competitive. It's good to make both field goal attempts last week, which is kind of settling as a coach. But it's definitely that competition is not over. And then return game starting to figure some things out as well. So with that, any questions you guys may have, happy to answer those.
Thanks, Coach. We'll start with Tom Caker, Hawkeye Report.
Hey, Levar.
What's up, Tom?
Wanted to ask you about what do you tell Arlen this weekend if he's returning punts with Corsack, maybe some balls inside the 10? What's kind of the go spot and the leave it alone spot for you guys?
Yeah, I think with Corsack, first off, he's a tremendous punter. I think we all saw that firsthand here in 2019. And then he hasn't gotten any worse over the last couple of years. So he's definitely a very good player. He can put the ball where he wants to, when he wants to. I think from our perspective as a returner, want to be smart with the balls that we choose to field and choose to return. But I think, like as you mentioned, inside the 10, I mean, we have a pretty hard and fast rule. We're not trying to return balls that deep. But, I think like going back to Corsack, he's a tremendous player. And from all accounts I've heard, is a really tremendous young man. So excited to see him again. Excited to see how he's progressed as a player.
Kennington Smith, Des Moines Register.
Morning, Coach Woods. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, good morning to you. Actually, great morning to you. My players would rip my butt if I said good morning. Great morning to you.
All right. Wanted to ask you about Caleb Johnson, kind of how he's ascended into a role of returning kicks. Did so against Nevada, listed as the kick return on the depth chart. So just wanted to ask you about how that opportunity came about and what you've seen from him.
Yeah, I think we all saw flashes of Caleb Johnson this past week with the way he ran the ball in the run game offensively. And I think for us as a returner, I think the sky's really the limit for him. He's a big, strong, fast kid that's just starting to get his feet wet as a returner, and I only expect him to improve each day. And I mentioned back in fall camp about how back in 2017, no one knew who Amir Smith-Marset was. No one knew who Ivory Kelly-Martin was until we started playing the game and getting into the season. I think there's some of that there with Caleb as well. I think he's got great ability. It's just going to come down to each day getting a little bit better and his fundamentals and understanding the return game better. But like I said, he's got the physical ability.
Coach, our next question comes from John Steppe, Cedar Rapids Gazette.
Hey, Levar, how are you?
I'm well, John. How are you?
I'm great. Having a great morning. So, when you have two teams like this that embrace special teams as much as Iowa and Rutgers do, is this like the Super Bowl for you?
I don't know if it's the Super Bowl. We try to approach each game as if it's its own game. But it's definitely a challenge we have with Rutgers. They're a good football team. Special teams, as you mentioned, is important to them. You can see that in how they play and how they're coached. We've seen them from afar for the last couple of years. Their return game is really good. They've got two incredibly dangerous returners with number 1 and number 12. And then their punter we've already seen and talked about. He's exceptional. And then now they've got a new kicker. So nothing's really changed with them that I've seen. Other than the numbers may be different, some names may be different, but what they're trying to do and some of their weapons are definitely capable weapons, and it's a big challenge for us, as is every challenge. We're going on the road for the first time as a football team. I've got a fairly young room, so that'll be a challenge in itself going on the road. And I remember when my first road trip back when I was a collegiate player, and some of the differences and distractions. That potential distractions out there that we need to avoid, and it's never quite the same as playing at home with the fans cheering for you and the fans, all the adoration, all the Australian flags waving and things like that. Like it's not that way on the road. There may be an Australian flag, but there won't be for Tory at Rutgers.
Scott Document, The Athletic.
Levar, it's outstanding to see you. How you been?
I'm great. How are you, Scott?
I'm fantastic.
Good.
One thing wanted to ask you about was kind of the commonality of some of the Australian punters. You went to pro kick when you got Tory, and it seems like their precision in the way they kick is maybe the difference between them and maybe a lot of American punters who have equally strong legs, but it seems like the ability to cut the ball, the directional punting, and some of the other things. Am I seeing that right? And if so, how are they trained so they can get to that point? Because these two are as good as anybody.
Yeah, I think you're right in some of that. In that there is a difference, right? But I think a lot of it, the difference comes from repetitions. I mentioned previously in other interviews that the way our players grow up, our kids grow up here. They grow up passing the football with their hands. These guys grow up passing the football with their feet. So my point is, I think they have more opportunities, more reps. They play the game. They've been playing this game for a long time. Now it's just on a football field, and punting the ball and kicking the ball with their feet and passing it to each other. So the precision happens, I think, from that. And then I think if you were to put an Australian punter versus an American quarterback, the American quarterback is better at throwing, and the Australian punter is better at punting. If that makes any sense, but I think a lot of it just is repetition and how they've grown up. But as you mentioned, I mean, Corsac is as good a punter as I think we've ever seen. And if my stats are correct, he hasn't had a touchback in 136 attempts roughly, and he's never been blocked. And rarely does he give up a return. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us.
Chad Leistico, Des Moines Register.
Hi, Levar. I wanted to ask a couple questions about blocked punts. First of all, can you actually tackle a punt? This is a dumb question. Can you tackle the punter if you get there that fast?
It depends. Once he's established himself as a punter, it's treated like a quarterback, right? So if the quarterback sets up to pass, he has protection in that way. If the punter sets up to punt the ball, he's treated like a quarterback. So you have to block the punt. You can't just tackle him. If he's running, you can tackle him. If he's running and not trying to attempt to punt the ball.
It seemed like Jackson got there a bit early the other day and almost had a chance. He almost got there too early, correct?
Yeah, I don't know how that punt didn't get blocked. Actually, it went underneath his abdomen. So.
Yeah. Okay. So my real question here is just how have you been so successful in the punt block? I mean, is that something you study? Walk us through. Is that a study thing? Is that a game plan thing? How do you go about it?
It's definitely stuff we study. I mean, we study everything, right? That's what we're trying to do as coaches and trying to find weaknesses and strengths and like where can we gain an edge. That's what every coach tries to do. But I think as far as that goes, it's something we practice. It's something we emphasize, and typically when you emphasize something, you get the result. So that's something that we've been emphasizing, and that goes back to last year. But I think that some of the success, and we had a miss the other day, which is in that situation, it's not something we want to do. We have the lead. We're just trying to get the ball back, and we end up roughing the punter. And unfortunately, the drive got extended, but fortunately, we were able to put the fire out defensively. And Coach Parker and I were, he's not happy. I'm not happy with the situation because the defense has to go back on the field and do a job they already did once. And that's not good. It's not good team football. So we're trying to avoid that stuff, but trying to be opportunistic when the opportunity arises.
Chloe Peterson, Daily Iowa.
Hi, Coach. I just wanted to ask
Chloe.
you about Luke Elkin. How have you seen him become more consistent over the past year and a half?
Yeah, so Luke Elkin, I think this kid is tremendous. I think we have two really good snappers in our room and two guys that are emerging leaders, not only in our room but on the football team. I think these guys, both with Liam Reardon and with Luke Elkin, I think these guys are really, really good. And you mentioned about Luke, and Luke, I think, he got kind of thrust in the situation last year as a freshman on the road at Iowa State. Again, first road game that we talked about, first opportunity is in one of the loudest environments we played in last year. But he handled the situation well, and I think he continues to handle most situations pretty well. And Luke is very consistent, has been for us, and continues to be consistent. As I mentioned about him as a person, I think he has tremendous leadership. There's some similarities between, when we were recruiting him, I compared him to, he reminds me of Danny Olsta from a snap and from his size and athleticism, and then with the personality and kind of the traits of Casey Kreider. You look at some of the comparisons. Casey Kreider, son of coach and school teacher, school administrator. Same thing with Luke. So the commonalities are kind of ironic and very similar kind of upbringings and people. And I think the sky's the limit for him, and really happy with him. And I mentioned Liam Reardon as well. I mean, Liam is a good snapper as well. We're very fortunate to have both those guys. Liam's dad played here, Bill Reardon, back in the late 90s, and was a teammate of mine. A really good guy, a really good player. Was a center for us at Iowa. Started as a center. Was also our starting snapper, which is crazy to think about. Right, the starting center is a starting snapper, but he's picked up that trade his dad has, and the guys in the team love him. Guys in the room love him. So again, we have two. It's talking about position rooms and special teams. It's really good when your snappers are the leaders, and the snappers are kind of leading the charge, because they're the ones that they're like Switzerland, right? They work with both guys, the punter and the kicker, and the kicker wants his time, the punter wants his time. Well, guess who has to decide? The snapper does. So it's fun having those guys, and guys that can take charge and do well at what they're asked to do.
Coach, we'll go back to Kennington Smith.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, still muted. You said during media day that one of the things that you wanted to evaluate with your kickers was the preparation and what they were doing in between downs and the field goal range. When you think about what happened these last 2 weeks with Iowa State and the crazy sequence leading up to the last second field goal, then Nevada was raining, but then there was multiple delays. What have you learned from each of your kickers throughout these last few weeks, and how has that aided you in kind of your evaluation of both of them?
Yeah, so both. It's funny you bring that up. I'm glad you brought it up and that you recognize that, because both of those guys were in crazy situations. Okay, you talk about Aaron in Iowa State. These are all situations we've practiced. They're all things we've talked about. They're all things we've prepared for, but it's never quite the same until you actually get in it. And the Iowa State game was, all right, we all think the game's over. Like, oh man, what the heck? We get sacked, fumbled. Well, that's not what happened. That if you go back and watch the tape in order, and those plays, a sequence of events, it's wild. It should be a situation study. The NCAA should study, and these people that study all these stats and statistics will study that at some point, right? Because we're in the minus territory. The quarterback gets sacked, fumbled, game's over. Oh no, penalty. Okay, then they get a bench clearing, or I can't remember. They had a personal foul. Yeah, bench clearing penalty, right? Their bench came on the field, so add 15. We get the ball back. Add 15. Bang. We get the ball and across the 50 one more time. We're in field goal range. Like, holy crap, we're really going. And I think we handled the situation well, but it's not something that you go from sitting on the bench thinking the game's over till 10 seconds later you're in and trying to tie the game. So my point is, like, it's definitely not an easy situation for a first-time kicker with Aaron to go out there. And then you fast forward the next week. Okay, so now Drew gets the nod as the place kicker. And you get in a situation where the game took 7 hours, right? So 4 hours roughly of delays. And Keith Duncan had that, and Keith and Caleb had that back in 2019 over in Ames. It's something we've talked about. It's something we've studied. It's something, okay, what is our plan of attack? The night before the game, we talked about it. The morning of the game, we talked about it. If this does happen, I don't think it'll really happen, but if it does, this is our plan of attack. And I thought the guys handled those situations as best as they could. But again, talking about two kickers, both guys who don't have a lot of game experience. Those are wild situations to be in right off the bat.
Back to John Steppe.
Is there a point where you'd like to have the kicker situation settled where, okay, this is our field goal guy? Or is this something that you think could play out across the whole season where we see both Aaron and Drew?
Yeah, I think every coach would like to have everything settled and go the way you want it to, and everything be perfect. But that's not the world we live in, right? So we got to be flexible in that regard. But I'm happy with how these guys have been competing and how they've been working. It's no different. I keep going back to 2019, right, and then 2020 with both Keith and Caleb, both very capable guys, both guys on their own journey, different points in their career. But I think iron sharpens iron, and the thing I saw with those two guys is that every day they came and they competed and they helped each other. And hey, I think your plant is a little bit deep here, or hey, I think your swing needs to be adjusted there. All things that really help you, and it's no different than having like a good sparring partner in wrestling, or a good, in boxing, a good sparring partner, people that you can bounce things off of and ideas off of. That all that does is make each guy better, and I think that's what we have right now. And if it shakes out and settles down, that would be great. I may sleep a little bit more, but it's not about me. It's about the players and about this team. So whatever we got to do to get this win.
Scott Document.
Levar, I wanted to ask you kind of about the phenomenon that is Corey Taylor. He is, for the brand. Pat McAfee has really touted him, called him the alien, and his personality reminds me a lot of a guy you coached, George Kittle, in some ways, because he's got an outsized personality, but a great guy. What have you noticed about him? Have you ever had to keep him in line ego-wise, or is he just naturally able to deflect some of the attention he's got? How is he to kind of deal with on a one-on-one level?
Yeah, I think to answer those questions, I think you have to look at kind of the 3 years that he's been here. And, the first year was a blur for both of us. And I think, he came in the middle of the pandemic. It was wild. He didn't know up. He didn't know down. He just went out and punted the ball and really didn't know the game, right? And then I think year two, being candid, I think maybe some of the expectations that maybe he put on himself or that other people put on him, I think maybe got to him. And now I don't see that at all with Torrey. You mentioned his personality. First and foremost, what makes Torrey Torrey is his personality, and he's a tremendous person. I think anyone that's a teammate of him, anyone that spends time around him, I think will tell you that as a person, he's outstanding, first class. And if you've gotten a chance to meet his parents, if you haven't, I really hope that you do over the next. They're here, the rest of this week, and then next week here from Australia visiting. If you meet them, you'll know exactly why he is the way he is, and his family, and they're awesome, fantastic people. But from a ego checking, I haven't had to do that. His teammates do that for him. The room does that for him, so I don't have to do that. I think the guys police themselves. I've mentioned their little fine system that they have. They're always fining each other for crazy antics, but that kind of keeps everyone in line. But I haven't seen ego, anything like that. I can tell you from, and I watch that stuff pretty hard, or try to. I think from my perspective though, when you go out into the stadium and you see an Australian flag, from a guy that really came here out of nowhere, to have that comfort. And then the last game, I looked back behind our bench and I see his mom, his dad, his brother, his little brother, and I see his mom and dad each having a Busch Light tall boy in their hands, and I'm like, man, this has got to be welcome to Iowa. Welcome to Iowa right here. 2 Australians drinking Busch Light in Kinnick Stadium. So it's a pretty amazing phenomenon, but he's having a good season, and I think the hard work that he's put in, particularly over this last year, is paying off for him, and I think the sky's the limit for him. There's still a lot more out there for him, and that not to mention he's got great setup man with Luke has been his snapper. He's got great gunners and protection. So, and he'll be the first to tell you that. And I go back. One thing I listen to Jack Campbell and Seth Benson say. We start every Friday practice, and they say this is the best punt unit in the country. And those two say that, and they're not punting the ball. They're just protecting and covering for Torrey. And it shows up with how they operate, and they run down and they block, they protect, and they go down and try to make tackles. You're talking about 2 veteran guys, 2 seniors, 5th-year seniors. That a lot of times that doesn't happen on most teams, but here it happens, and it's been great for Iowa football.
Coach, we have 3 more hands that are raised. We'll knock them out one by one. Chad likes to go.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about Torrey, so just thank you for sharing him with us. He's a breath of fresh air every time we interview him. But since I'm here, I'm going to
You also have to hold your hat every time he talks, so you're not really sure what's going to come out of his mouth. Kind of like George, yeah.
So I will follow up with a guy in my area that people are very excited about, Xavier Wampa. It seems like he's really bought into the special teams. His rookie year here, how have you seen him kind of buy into that and excel at special teams right now?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think Xavier is another great kid, right? Like a kid that if you look at all the attention he had coming in here, all the fanfare of the number one this, number one that, could have gone anywhere in the country. He doesn't carry himself that way. Very much like Torrey. You don't have to. I haven't had to see that. Let's put it that way. Maybe his teammates may say something different, but and also I think go back to he's a really good football player, right? Really good football player in general, and he's just a young guy learning defense, learning some things, but he's being able to cut his teeth on special teams and playing really well. And I'm happy with how he's trending, how he's playing. We're trying to find more spots to get him on the football field, more things that you as a coach, because you see it, you trust some of the things that he's doing, particularly for a young guy. I'd say the last guys like that were Campbell, Benson, guys that have been really good football players here. But I like him. He's a great kid. There's a lot that he can do, and there's a lot more that he's still learning to do. So it's fun to watch. It's always fun to see young guys kind of come on their own and develop, and I think he's one of those guys.
Kenny?
Coach, you touched on Arlen a bit earlier, but just kind of overall, what have you seen from him as a punt returner? I believe he's the only one who's returned punts so far. And then on the kick return side, we've seen Riley back there, Cooper, now came up last week. What's your assessment of that position and kind of the competition that's happening there?
Yeah, I think punt returner right now we've sort of settled in on Arlen Bruce, with Cooper DeJean, and then also Alec Wick and Riley as well back there at times. And punt return. Kick return right now, Caleb's been the guy, and you guys have gotten a chance to see that. Riley's been back there, as you mentioned, and then also with both Cooper and Gavin Williams back there as well. And I think what we're looking for is just trying to build some consistency in the kick return game. As you guys know, I use this reference a lot. It's like a symphony, right? Like making music. If the timing's off at this place, the timing's off at that position, every person doesn't do their job, the music sounds disjointed and broken, and it's not clean, crisp music. But if everyone's hitting right, the timing's right, you're picking your blocks up right, then the music is beautiful. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to find and trying to get settled into here in kick return. As far as punt return, I'm happy with what Arlen's done. As a young guy, you're always looking and, hey, did he make a good decision? Could he have done this? Could he have done that? Like I've told him, I'm never gonna, if he ever signals fair catch and catches the ball, I'm never gonna say, hey, that's a bad choice, because we want the ball back at the end of the play, right? But as he gets more comfortable and starts to test some things, I think you'll see more from him in the return game. He had a good job last week. Had 3 returns. I think 25, a 12, and a 13. They got negated by penalty, if I recall. So he's off in the right track in that regard.
Hey, Coach, our last question, John Steppe.
Got a bit of a two-part question here. First of all, what have you seen from Cooper DeJean on special teams this year? And second, if you'd remiss if I don't bring up holding, how have you seen Torrey grow as a holder?
Yeah, man, you're hitting them all today. So Cooper, I think we've all seen Cooper as a football player. Like, forget what position he plays and what spot and all that stuff, right? The guy's a really good football player, and I don't think I'm remiss in saying that from anybody, his teammates included. But he's a really good football player, and I think there's a lot he can do, help us with on our team in regards to special teams, whether it's back deep as a returner, whether it's holding a guy up, whether it's going for punt blocks. The issue with him is how much can you load him up with, and how much can you ask him to do within a game. And he doesn't come off the field on defense. That's a difficult thing to do. Desmond King, it took Desmond. Desmond didn't do that until his junior and senior year. And Cooper is doing it here, and it really is, for all intents and purposes, redshirt freshman year, because I kick myself. We should have played him a lot more last year than we did. But that's water on the bridge, can't go back. And then as far as a holder, he's been doing a good job holding Cooper, and I think Torrey's done a pretty good job as well holding, and that's been smooth. I go back to the setup man as a snapper, right? The position that always gets overlooked, but when you're getting great snaps from the snapper, it makes the holder's job a lot easier, which settles down rookie or newcoming kickers. So those are things that we've been happy with, and we got to continue to improve. No one's perfect, and we're always chasing that and trying to be as good as we can possibly be and see where this thing goes.
Great, thank you, Coach. Thanks for your time, and best of luck this weekend out at Rutgers.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys out there. All right, bye-bye.